And we're live. What's up, party people? This is the A.live podcast, season 2, episode 5. I got a special guest here with me. They're always a special guest. I'm going to just cut to the chase. I got Dave B here with me. Dave, thanks for doing this, man.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I know we planned this, quite some time ago, several months ago, and we didn't foresee having to do it remotely like this. So this is something new. This is the first episode that I've done where I don't actually have the guest in the podcast studio with me. So I didn't really have any technical challenges setting this up. It ran pretty smoothly. So I'm just excited that I'm still able to do this during this time of quarantine and isolation, if you will. So yeah, man, happy Easter to everybody also, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely different times. Like, I know a lot of people can't go and see their families today. I know a lot of people, are just stuck in that same stay-at-home order that the governor has in place to keep us all safe from the virus. Hopefully, we see that it's the numbers are dropping soon, and we can get back to normal life. But for now, whether you're in the recovery community or you're not in the recovery community, I know a lot of people are doing meetings on Zoom. And I was afraid that I was going to the podcast was going to lose its effectiveness, because now everyone can just tune into a Zoom meeting and they're less inclined to tune into the A.live podcast. And it was kind of it had me down for a couple weeks until I decided, I had to make a decision. Am I going to just see this season through and continue with all these guests that I have lined up, or am I just going to throw in the towel, forfeit, and, jump on the Zoom meeting bandwagon, which I have. I've been going to Zoom meetings, but this podcast is special to me because I get to connect with people, and I get to not only for me, but it's good for the viewers who may need a message of recovery, especially in this time of quarantine. They can't get out of their house. They can't go to a meeting. So when I really think about it in that way, the podcast doesn't lose its effectiveness. It's just another platform that people can use. Maybe there's someone that needs a meeting, but doesn't really want to show their face in the Zoom meeting, because it can be kind of awkward, and maybe they just want to listen and not have to participate, if you will. So if you're listening, if you're tuning in today, definitely appreciate you coming by. Again, happy Easter. I want to get to Dave's story here in just a moment. But first, I want to, just take a moment and ask everyone at home just to quiet their minds and just give a moment of silence to the people not only suffering from the disease of addiction, but the people who are losing their lives to this COVID-19, or the people who are trying to get into the healthcare system for other reasons and they're having trouble because it's so flooded right now. I think it's just important that we just give a moment of silence for those people. Yeah, so again, thanks, Dave, for doing this. I'm really excited to have you, not here in the studio, but have you on my screen in front of me. It's cool that we get to do this today. It's a different form of connection, but it's connection nonetheless. So how have you been coping with this isolation? What are you doing today for your recovery?
It's been weird, man. Just like you said, it's strange. Luckily I'm still working, and my life hasn't changed too much, besides the fact that I don't get to see as many people as I'd like to see. I don't get to do all the little things that I didn't even realize were, it was more of all the little time, just going out to eat with my friends in a restaurant. It's just, luckily, and I'm probably not the best citizen when it comes to quarantining.
Sure.
But I've been hiking a lot with my friends. I've been hanging out in the woods. I've been like the Zoom meetings have been helping me a lot. I definitely didn't love them at first. And like I really hate the whole FaceTime. Like I don't like looking at a screen and seeing
Yeah.
myself in the corner. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but it's been like a learning experience, man. And I like, luckily I have had more free time, and that's led me to like start writing on my steps again. And you know, but this whole situation has definitely tested my recovery for sure. Like
Mm.
I've definitely noticed like certain character defects popping back up, having more free time on my hands, and just a lot more time to think, man. And so like I work in a treatment center, and since the coronavirus thing started, like I'm grateful I can still work, but there's been like 10,000 more like protocols we have to do,
Mm.
and like we're cleaning the place every 20 to 35 minutes, and it's been stressful, man. It really has been. But yeah, dude, like I've just been trying to stay active and writing on my step work. I have had more time to pray and meditate. Um, something really special that just happened to me is my only sponsee actually just celebrated a year on Friday, which
Mm.
was all.
That's a huge accomplishment, man. That's
Yeah,
cool. Nice.
it sucks that it had to be on Zoom, but he was all for it, and it was awesome. It definitely
Yeah,
was.
dude. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, we're in an adjustment period right now. This is all very new to us, but it might be the new norm. Even when we can get back to meetings in person, I don't foresee the connection lagged a little bit. Yeah, that's the one thing about doing this. We may run into a little bit of problems, but that's okay. Moving on. So that's exciting, dude, about your sponsee though. That's a huge accomplishment. I think I think you mentioned something about like you notice some character defects popping up since you have more time clean, and like, dude, I can relate to that. Me too, 100%. And like sometimes, like just yesterday, my girlfriend was like, maybe we should just like, do our own things today, which we went, and I'm so grateful for her. And one of the things that we were able to do, instead of like taking time, we did take some time for ourselves, and after a while, we were able to come together, and we went on a hike, just like you mentioned that you've been doing a lot of. We went on a hike yesterday, and I guess the governor says that we shouldn't gather with more than 10 people. So we went to pretty much like a hot spot hiking area in Harvard County. It's called the King and Queen Seat. It's this overlook. It's just beautiful. It's breathtaking. And there was like definitely more than 10 people there, right? Eventually the park ranger came up and he was like, you guys, we got to clear you out of here, So me and my girlfriend, we took it as like, well, we just can't congregate all in one area. But he didn't say we have to leave the park or leave the area. So we kept it moving, we respected his orders, and we left. But yeah, it's definitely weird, we can't congregate like that. So back to what you were saying about your character defects showing up and rearing their ugly heads, right? As some people would say, is that, I wanted to follow up with a question. It's like, how do you deal with those challenging situations now? I know it could be a tough question, right?
I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes I love to just sit in it and like stew on it.
That's the worst, though, in my opinion.
And I don't even love to do it. I just feel like I'm so naturally inclined to do it.
Yeah.
But I'll be like, I know what I have to do, which is probably reach out to somebody and just talk about what I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I'll wait like a day or two to do that, and I'll just be building up resentments, just sitting there.
Yeah, man.
Stewing on it, and then justifying why I'm acting a certain way towards certain people or whatever it is, dude. And like I'm sure that's the disease of addiction right there.
Yeah, 100%. That's what I identify it as,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Yeah, dude. I mean, stewing on it is probably the worst thing we can do. But it's like, because it like just makes it bigger and bigger and bigger. And it, like, for me, that like it's a little frustration can build into anger, can build into resentment, can build into other things that may not be so healthy, ways to react, like, without a doubt, I have anger issues that I need to learn how to work on, like, healthily. So that's something that I'm like learning about myself, especially now during this quarantining process. Like, how do I deal with these uncomfortable feelings when I can't really get outside myself, or easily distract myself with something,
Yeah.
It's definitely a trying time, plus there's all that angst added into it from everyone else in the world. Like, people are scared right now. People don't know what life's gonna be like a month from now. I'm also working as well, and I work in the finance industry, and there's a ton of people who are losing their jobs and they can't pay their bill with us. So I'm in the lending industry. We make personal loans, and people are just like, calling every other phone call is like, I lost my job, I can't make a payment, and I won't be able to make a payment until the end of June. And so we have to, our whole process, like my job as I knew it is completely different.
Yeah.
Completely different. We're learning new things, and the policy is changing every day, and it's very difficult to keep up with that policy. Even for my manager, it's like, everyone's just getting frustrated at each other, and it's like, we're all in this together. It really is true, and that's the same thing with recovery. We're all in this together, and we have to love and support one another from afar if we have to do it by virtual Zoom meetings, or this podcast, for example, is just another outlet. There's other ways other than Zoom. I think people are just so attracted to it because it's like trending right now. But I think we're going to find is that, we need something else. We need something more. There's a lot of like social media things that are about recovery that aren't encouraging meeting in person, even though some people are still meeting in person. Like you mentioned, like, you may not be the best citizen when it comes to quarantining, and I mean, I can relate to that. Just going out yesterday and spending time in that crowd of people. Like, now keep in mind, we were still social distancing. We were more than 6 feet away from people, but because there was like 20 people in a relatively close area, we had to clear out, so and it's important that I remember to follow those rules, because as an addict, it's the only natural instinct to go against what is suggested, go against rules and society and laws and things like that. Not because I choose to, but it's just because it's like in my blood, I guess. I don't know. But you mentioned having a sponsee. You said it's your one and only sponsee?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how long do you have clean?
I celebrated 2 years in January.
Okay. Awesome, man. So yeah, okay, that's right. Yeah, I wasn't able to make it. I had something going on, but I think, I celebrated 2 years just the following month. So that's cool. Right. We're not far off. And I think when I had initially like met you, I think you said you were from this area that I'm in now. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah. Like Catonsville?
Yeah, Catonsville, Arbutus is where I grew up.
Oh, really? Nice, dude. Okay. So are you familiar with Narcotics Anonymous? Or I shouldn't be putting the program on blast like that. I just broke our anonymity. Sorry about that. But yeah, it's going to happen from time to time. Are you in a program of recovery down here before you moved up to where you are now?
No, so I didn't. When the first time I attempted to get clean, I ended up in like a treatment center in Annapolis.
Okay.
I ended up moving into like a recovery house out there. So that's where I spent all my time using, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I get it, But you got into recovery before you moved up to where you are now. So you did a lot of using in this area that I'm in, and then you got clean in Annapolis. Did you kind of like stay in that area, Annapolis, for a while?
Yeah, I was in the whole like Bay Area.
Okay.
Um, I never really left recovery, but I have a bunch of relapses in there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where I built my first network and stuff like that. I just, there's a million things I didn't do that I should have done.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah,
I can relate.
I've had a year or close to a year clean like more than once.
Mm-hmm.
Different areas, I was in Annapolis, Severna Park, uh, Pasadena, and then this time around, my recovery started in Southern Maryland. I was living in Chesapeake Beach, which is in Calvert County.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've been out there on a hike recently. Is that
Yeah.
oh the Calvert Cliffs are out there?
Yep.
Yeah. Beautiful area to hike. Beautiful area. I'm sure you've been there.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool, man.
Awesome.
Yeah. Now I'm sure you work the steps, right?
Yes, I do. Yep.
Very good, very good. That's the right answer, even if you don't. I'm just kidding. I know you do. So in regards to the steps, I don't know where you're at in your step working process, and like as much as you choose or care to elaborate on it is up to you. But what was like the most challenging step you've worked so far?
Definitely, definitely the whole 6 and 7 process was
Hmm.
like doing the actual writing wasn't the hard part, but that's the most challenging time I've had in recovery for sure.
Really? Now, if you don't mind elaborating, what is step 6 and 7?
So 6 and 7 are all, I guess, regarding your character defects,
Okay.
identify, and then the sixth step is identifying them, and then the seventh step is basically asking whatever your higher power is to remove them,
Mm-hmm.
which is took me a long time to understand that step, right?
Yeah. Well, forgive me for like cutting in there. It sounds to me like step 7 is a lot like step 3, except you're like, because like step 3 is where I'm at, and like
Yeah.
that's where I made a decision to turn my care over to a power greater than myself, right? So, it sounds like you're doing that all over again, but you're doing it with your character defects. So
Yeah.
it sounds similar. Is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's funny you said that because I remember the feeling I got after like actively working step 3 for a few months is like very similar to the same feeling after working 7 for a couple months,
Mm.
just like finally coming out on the other side and like looking back instead of being like, because when I started step 6 and 7, that's like right when I moved to this area
Mm-hmm.
and know anybody, and it was just a really weird and like uncertain time. And
Sure. Absolutely. I get that. 100%.
yeah, man. And then like after, working through it a little bit and like then looking at it in hindsight, like I can see like how much better I've gotten, like how much I've grown through that. And it's all still there, dude. And it's kind of the hard part is like noticing, like I'm super aware of them now, like my defects, right? And like when I'm acting out on them, I can see myself doing it, and like I actively choose to still do it sometimes. Like I know I'm doing it.
Yeah.
So it's hard, man, because I miss being like ignorant to it,
Yeah.
Like,
It was much easier than it sounds like. Yeah. It's like, because you talked about like, identifying those character defects. That's step 6. Is that right?
yes, yeah,
Okay. And then 7 is like really just turning those over to power greater than ourselves, which can restore us to sanity.
yeah.
Now, that sounds like a painful process.
Yes, it was. Yep.
Still is. Are you
Mhm.
still like what step are you on right now?
So right now I'm writing on 10.
Okay.
And
So
like
8 is making a list, right?
and like as soon as like the questions like
Yeah.
all them questions, I'll stop up here and be like, all right, we'll worry about this later, because it's a lot, man. You
It's a
know?
lot. It's a lot. I'm impressed actually that you have come so far in your step work in just 2 years. That's amazing. Like that's inspiring to me. So I thank you for like being in your process, man, because that encourages me to grow through those growing pains that I'm talking about that you mentioned, like when identifying those character defects. Now I'm not there in my step working process, but I feel like I still like those character defects present themselves, and because I'm clean, I can see them, and I can be aware of them today. It's just that I'm not in the step working process where I'm writing them down and
Right.
So man, like the step working process for me has been very rewarding. It's been very painful, but you mentioned like looking back in hindsight after going through a step, right? And seeing the growth. Like when you're going through those growing pains, you're just like, oh man, like is this ever going to end? Is this, and you don't really see the growth. You're going through the growth, so you can't really see it. It's like that saying, like you can't spot self-deception, right? That's what you need a sponsor for. And it's just crazy, man. Like to think that you're not really aware of the growth when you're going through that process. But then when you look back, and it's just like anything else in life, I didn't see that this was going on in my life at the time, but now that I look back on it, I realize, man, here we are 2 years later, 1 year later, whatever.
The coolest part now is when I am going through something hard, like this whole situation right here. Like I have that to look forward to. Like I know that one day I'm going to be able to look back and be like, wow, like I got through that. That was tough. And like life's a little bit easier right now.
Mm-hmm.
And,
yeah.
I never was ever capable of looking at stuff like that in the past, ever.
For those people new in recovery, I want to ask you this question because you just mentioned it's easier now, right? So even for me, I'm asking for me, like going through that painful process is very painful in the time that you're going through it. But now you mentioned things are easier. In what ways are they easier? Is it just easier to get through things because you're aware of the defects, or what is it about? What is it about going through those painful feelings that makes it easier for you now?
Man, I noticed that every time I share, I feel like I struggle to talk about like my higher power for some reason, because I don't want to throw anybody off. I don't want to
Sure.
deter anybody because, I'm not exactly religious or anything like that. But I think somewhere along the lines, probably that third step that we were talking about, like I have like this faith, and I only have faith because I've been through things and came out on the other side, like I said. And there's been so many times where I left my recovery like right before the miracle happens, right?
Yeah.
Like I remember one day I relapsed. This was like, I think I had 11 months. I was like a few days shy of a year, and I ended up using something. And that same day, this kid called me and asked me to sponsor him, like an hour after I used. And that was just I was enjoying what I had just done. I was like, this feels good. And then he called me, or he sent me a text or something, and like all that guilt just popped up instantly. Like, and I feel like using has never been the same since that moment. But dude, I completely forgot what your question was.
That's all right. That was a good example. I was really like captivated by that story because I can remember so many times where, practicing the principles that I learned up until that point, whenever it was in my recovery, even though maybe I hadn't worked any steps that I had chose to go back out, whether it's I had 3 months clean, 1 month clean, 6 months clean, 9 months clean, until I have the clean time that I have now, which is a little over 2 years. The most I've ever had before this was 9 months, right? So I can remember just like that feeling of throwing it all away, and leaving before the miracle happened. And the miracle, it's not like one miracle. I find in my recovery today that miracles just keep on happening. And whether or not that I realize that in the moment when they're happening, like we were already talking about, it doesn't matter, because I'll look back in hindsight and be like, man, just a month ago I was XYZ, but now look at me.
Yep.
And it also sort of like it. I have to be careful, Dave, because like that kind of thing can like build an ego, and then then I'm unhealthy in other ways, even if I'm not using. So we really have to like practice the principles that are suggested to us in this program, right? And the three most indispensable ones that are like were really drilled into my recovery early on were honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, right? So these are the three that I keep up front with me, like all the time. And sometimes they can slip my mind, and I'll tell a little white lie thinking it's okay, but then again, that those character defects just like rear their ugly heads again, and the truth comes out, right? So and then I'm left to feel guilty, but I don't have to use over that guilt today, which is the good thing. My question, which I can't even remember now, it was that's all right, we can move on. It may come back up. The original question was what kind of challenges, or what was the most challenging step? So we can get back to the step where you're on the process of step, you said 10 right now?
10, yep.
So I think 8 is we made a list of all the people we have harmed, right? And became willing to make amends to them all. So 9 is what?
9 is making the direct amends, right?
Okay. So what was it? That sounds like an interesting experience. So it's like 9 is we made direct amends to people as long as it didn't cause any harm to them or others, something along those lines. So, man, that sounds like a difficult process as well, because making a list of all the people sounds painful, but actually having to confront those people and coming at them, not with just like an I'm sorry, not with like an empty apology, right? But actually, I mean, this is what I assume. I've never worked through this step, so I can only assume like you can't make a empty apology. Like you sincerely have to be sorry to that person, but it's not about just going to that person and apologizing, is it?
No, definitely not, man. And dude, I'm still learning too. Like,
Of course.
so
I don't expect you to have all the answers, Dave.
yeah,
That's not why I'm interviewing you today. But because you have 2 years of recovery under your belt, with seems like an awesome experience in the step working process. It seems like you've come so far in 2 years, and like it's really like, again, it's all inspiring to me. So I can only imagine how inspiring it must seem to the person with 1 day clean, 30 days clean, 90 days clean. That the step working process is transformational. So what was your experience in step 9 when you were making the amends to people? Understanding that, of course, you're still learning, and this isn't perfect process for anybody.
And first I want to say that I don't think I would have kept working steps if I didn't see it working in my life, Like,
of course,
I'm definitely a skeptic. I don't just believe stuff when people tell me, I have to actually experience it. But for step 9, the first time I got clean, I was in a different fellowship that I am in now, and I got through the steps pretty quickly, right? I didn't have to write on a million questions and all that stuff, but so I was able to make amends to some people back then, and luckily I was able to make amends to like not those super big ones, but like the close friends that maybe I ripped off, and it was stuff that they didn't even know about, like. For like a small example is I had these two friends that I grew up with, and I ended up stealing some stuff from them. And I knew that our relationship, like they knew I was struggling in the end, and I knew that it was going to be okay no matter what. So this was sort of, I guess, an easier amends, but it was still harder to look two people in the eye and say, "Hey, look, I stole this from you. You have no idea.
Hmm.
How can I make this right?" And I ended up, leaving some money with them and stuff, but I can't remember word for word what they said, but it was just like such an awesome experience, man.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like the majority of the amends I have to make to, my parents, and like I feel like most of them are like living amends.
Yeah.
And like for right now, financially, I don't have the extra cash to pay off the crazy shit I've done.
Mm-hmm.
But like my mom is like peaceful, like that's, I'm sure, all she wanted. And like I feel like I finally have given that to her. And
That's awesome, man.
and the hard part is though, like, my dad's an addict too, right? And there's a million resentments I have towards him.
Mm.
And like he's someone I need to make amends to, and I'm still learning how to be a son, even though he's not exactly present in my life.
Sure.
So that's something I'm learning and trying to focus on right now, because like as of like last week, I actually changed sponsors. Like we used to
Okay.
have this sponsor for a little while.
Yes.
I actually went back to my original sponsor that I had the first like year and a half or something like that. And just because we had done so much work together.
Mm-hmm.
And he's in Calvert County, so I thought I should find a sponsor out here, but it doesn't really matter right now anyway, right?
Right. We can't. Right.
But anyway, first thing he asked me is like, how's your relationship with your dad going? And I was like, well, it's pretty non-existent. And it's funny that he asked me that. Of all the stuff I've talked to him about, like that's what he asked me first. And I'm on my, I'm supposed to be in this amends process, and I'm not taking any action towards that relationship. So.
Man, dude, the energy that I feel across this, like, this remote platform that we're speaking on right now, it's crazy, man. It's like it's like you're in this room with me. It's just wild. I even got a text from my girlfriend just a second ago, which is why I looked at my watch, and she said he's gonna make me cry, like, because it's crazy how I just can capture your energy through this platform. It's real, man. It's raw. And thank you for sharing that. I'm sure it's not easy to talk about that stuff. You mentioned living amends and how living amends are different from financial amends. I mean, I think it's pretty clear, but just to elaborate on that a little bit, financial amends is when you have created a resentment, whether it's a resentment you have or someone has against you through maybe stealing money or borrowing money that you never paid back, or robbing someone for drugs, whether that's a drug dealer, or stealing your grandmother's Oxycontin from the medicine cabinet that she needed. It's like, how can we actually give those amends back? Well, those types of amends are amends that you can, go and earn money to pay them back financially, or replace something that you may have taken. Maybe you stole a TV, and like, it's not appropriate to give the value of the TV in money, but just buy a new TV, right? So that's an example of financial amends. Living amends is like, they take longer, I feel like. Maybe not. It depends on how much money you make and how quickly you can make money, I guess, right? But living amends are amends that you make when when you have to live the right way for a certain amount of time, where someone can actually recognize that you've made an internal change, right? Is that a good example of a living amends?
Yeah, man, I think so.
Yeah, so living amends may take longer because you've broken trust so many times in your life or in active addiction. And I'm not speaking about you, I'm speaking about me or just addicts in general. I've broken trust over and over and over again, and I've told people I'm sorry, and I go back and I do the same behaviors and act the same way that caused me to apologize in the first place. I'm not building or instilling any trust to build that back up with that person. So, finally, when we come into recovery, we learn, values and we learn morals, and we can apply these things to our life that eventually that person that we've lied to so many times, if we're lucky enough to still have them in our lives, right? Maybe they'll come around and see, oh, Aaron's changed, David's changed. I'm really proud of who they are today, and they do what they say and they say what they mean. That type of thing. And that's how you earn an amends to a living amends. So that's the difference between the two. I think I did a good job explaining that. I'm not sure, but okay. So the other thing I wanted to talk about in regards to amends is, have you ever found yourself in a position before you got to that amends process in your step work that you wanted to make an amends?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah, and that was a yes or no question. So now to elaborate on that, did you move forward with that amends before you got to this step process of making the amends?
Yeah, so I remember, I think it was around, so someone I owe an amends to is one of my aunts. Thanksgiving or last, I think I had a little under a year clean, and I definitely wasn't on this step yet, right? But I remember thinking, like, what if this is the only opportunity I have? Because she's not in state. She's not far. She's in Delaware, but I ended up not going through with it just because I didn't even have a year clean yet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been like it's been like a common theme with me to relapse right before a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm real quick to talk myself out of stuff anyway. If I get too much time to think about it, I'll shut down and be like, no.
Sure.
So, but I do remember the first time I ever got clean, like with 30 days clean, still dope sick, like being like, I need to go make amends to everybody, and I'm a changed person, blah 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 blah, only to go out and make the same mistakes over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. I can relate to that. I also think it's important that, the steps are in order for a reason. And that's basically what the reason I asked you. And these questions aren't to put you to a test. I'm not testing you as a person or your strengths and weaknesses in recovery. That's not what this is about. I wanted to just inform the newcomer that, steps are in order for a reason, and we don't want to go out and make amends before we're to that process in our recovery. Now, I guess, because I didn't wait till I got to, that step in my recovery process to make a financial amends. And I don't know if that's really different, because I think the process of recovery, it can come to fruition without us actually formally working that step. And I think that's okay. There's, that's just life as it, on life's terms, really. It's beyond our control. Whatever our higher power sees fit for us in our lives, he's going to put into action, regardless if we work this step or not. So I don't think it's wrong. I think what that suggestion is essentially saying is like, don't go out, like you said, don't go out and just make an empty apology or an empty promise to someone you own amends to before you're at that process, because you might find out that if you do that and then you repeat the same behavior that hurt that person in the first place, you're back to square one. It's like empty. And it's like you have to have worked these other steps formally to be able to get to that part spiritually, to be able to go and make that sincere, I don't want to say apology, but for lack of a better word, apology to that person. And having true meaning behind that. So the steps are in order for a reason, and I say these things out loud, not just for the newcomer, but for myself, because I'm in this process too. And, I don't want anybody to put anyone on a pedestal in recovery. Like, don't think like because I have a podcast and I have all this like expensive equipment behind me and I have the flashy lights and the cool little gadgets that I'm any further along in my recovery than anybody else. It's just that this is what I studied. I went to school for audio engineering and music production, but that doesn't make me any better than the person who did not, right? So it just means that that's what I like to do, and I've kind of invested my life savings into this studio, and now I can use that, which is really cool. I can use that knowledge that I have to bring a message of recovery, which was not my intention when I went to school for that, right? It was to make music and record musicians and do live shows and stuff like that. But I found that this is something else that I can do. So I say don't put people on pedestals because I've done that and they've let me down, and they've hurt me, and likewise I've probably hurt them too, but essentially I look to them as like a higher power, right? But what I do know is that this program has not failed me. The program has not failed me, but the people have, and there's a difference. And like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with like, admiring someone's recovery and holding on to their coattail and doing what they're doing to get another day clean, but don't worship them. Don't put them on a pedestal, because they're still human beings and they can still do things to hurt you or hurt other people. And, so it's a tricky thing, but this is just my experience and my process is that, and it's something that I have to be aware of, so if I can help somebody else by sharing my experience, strength, and hope, then that's what I'll do, because you got to give it away to keep it, they say, right, Dave?
Yeah.
So it's funny, so funny that all the cliches that are cliches and like, sometimes they sound stupid or they sound repetitive or monotonous, like they are true, and they reign truth in there that we have to take into consideration. So, but just as anyone else, I get tired of using them, hearing them, and saying them. So, but sometimes they're appropriate. Anyways, I have a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
What are the most valuable things to you in recovery today?
Definitely my friends, man. That's probably number one. My higher power is something that the relationship I have with whatever my higher power is, I don't try to think too deep into it at all. And that works for me. But that relationship that I built over the past 2 years has probably been the most significant thing, just because it's something I've never had before.
Your relationship with your higher power?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you because I'm in the part of my step work where it's like, step one is we, admitted we were powerless over our addiction. Our lives have become unmanageable. Step two is we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And step three is where I'm at now, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. So, this is where I'm just starting to, manifest that relationship for the very, I wouldn't say the first time, but for this is like a relationship takes work, right? So you can't I can say, like, when I was 7, I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And I'm not saying that just because Jesus is my higher power or God is my higher power, the Christian God, it doesn't mean that has to be yours, Dave. It doesn't mean that has to be whoever else is, It can be Buddha. It can be Allah. It can be the program of recovery. It can be anything that you choose it to be, so long as it's loving, is from what I understand. And so mine is the Christian God. But that doesn't mean that I can sit and say, like, I accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior when I was 7 years old. And, like, we've maintained a relationship that's been great ever since then, because that's not the truth. When I decided to take my will and use that to whatever, my advantage is usually how it goes in active addiction. I took my will and used it to my advantage, and I don't care about anyone else. That's my attitude in addiction, right? So that's not what my God wants for me or this world, So at that point in time, the relationship has ceased. It got cut off. Like, yeah, I still believed in him, but I wasn't practicing that religion, or I don't like to use that term. I would rather say I wasn't maintaining my relationship with God, So just like any other relationship, whether it's your relationship with your girlfriend, your relationship with your buddies, your relationship with your parents, your coworkers, your supervisor at work, like, if you want to have a good relationship, it has to be maintained. You have to do things to maintain that relationship. So, turning that will and that life over to the care of God as I understood him in this step process that I'm at, it's like really, really just like putting my will to the side, and accepting whatever I want what my God has for me. I don't think that I want what my God has for me, but just like we were talking about earlier, is like we don't see what he's really working on in us until we look back in hindsight. So I found when I moved down here, like, I was stripped of a ton of things, right? Stripped from like friendships, stripped from like practicing my my craft in the recording studio, different things that have just changed dramatically. And like, my God has a sense of humor. Like, he strips me down, right, so that he can build me back up to what he sees fit for me. And lately, that's been, a father, a role model to my girlfriend's daughter. It's been a good partner in a relationship, and finding out what sacrifices I have to make to be a good partner, right? And those things are fucking hard because I am so used to serving Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and being selfish and self-centered, and it's crazy, man. So like, it's really cool that you talked about building and growing that relationship with your higher power being that thing that is so valuable to you in your recovery. I mean, that's huge, man. That's inspiring to me again. Like, it's been really inspiring conversation with you, dude. I appreciate you coming back out, or coming out, I guess, staying at home really, and just giving me a call, on FaceTime. So that's cool, man. And I actually, this inspires me really to do more podcasts like this. I'm not limited as much anymore. I can interview someone in Florida. I can interview someone in Germany. I can interview someone in Pennsylvania, which is where I'm from. And like, I can have these conversations with people without, maybe it's not convenient for so-and-so to drive here, so I can do it this way. And that's cool. So this has been like a test run for the podcast, but it's really gone so smoothly. So I appreciate you being like the guinea pig, for lack of a better term, with this remote podcasting thing. But yeah, man, we have a couple more minutes. There's just really 2 more questions I had for you. What do you do on a daily basis to strengthen your recovery or maintain your recovery, I guess?
So, to backtrack on what you were just saying about building that relationship with your higher power, like, I feel like right before this whole pandemic situation happened, man, I was like super busy, dude. Like,
I can relate, man.
and I was complaining about everything. I remember I was
Mm-hmm.
about to get rid of my H&I commitment,
Mm-hmm.
which is a commitment I take into a rehab. Just take a meeting in there.
Yeah.
It's 1 day a month. It's nothing except
Right. And you were going to
for
reel that back thinking that was going to make the difference in your
yeah,
schedule.
and I stopped. I was just falling out of my routine of praying every morning. Not completely, but I just there was little tiny things that I wasn't doing that I had done in the beginning, and everything was just getting more stressful, right?
Sure.
And then I noticed that, and then this started happening, man. And now I have like all this free time, and like I prayed for it, like
Yeah,
prayed,
yeah,
literally prayed for this, and now I'm complaining about it. Um,
Be careful what you wish for, right?
exactly, man.
Yeah.
But I need you to repeat your question again.
That's all right. I just kind of want to elaborate on what you just said. Like it's not, you got to be careful what you wish for. This is not, you prayed for this, right? You prayed for having more time, but this is not how you envisioned it. So
No,
it goes along with that saying, like, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it, right? It just may not be in the way that you see, right?
mm,
So the question was, what do you do on a daily basis, or your daily routine to maintain or strengthen your recovery?
so I think the most special time I have is usually on a weekend, right? When I don't have any obligations in the morning, and like I just come out to this table right next to me, right, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
drink coffee and I'll read literature, and it'll be quiet, and I'll just have my time to, and like that's like what I look forward to, During the weekdays, of course I pray every morning, I pray all day. I work in the recovery field, so, and like I just want to point out that just because I work in a treatment center, like that really has nothing to do with my recovery at all. Like it's hard work, man, because the majority of the people I work with don't know what recovery is. They don't want recovery. They just want to
Mm-hmm.
dry out for a little bit.
Right. They call it an oil change. You can get an
Yeah,
oil change and, reduce your tolerance to the drug or the alcohol, whatever it is that you consume in your active addiction, and your tolerance goes way down, which makes it dangerous for people who don't go in treatment with the intention of staying clean, because they just want
right.
to clean up, lower their tolerance so they can get out, use exactly what they were using, and that kills them, just like that.
Yeah.
And it's scary. So.
What's cool though is, man, like they practice a lot of harm reduction,
Mm.
and that's because I understand not everybody's gonna be able to just remain abstinent from drugs and work the 12 steps like I'm trying to do. Like it's not for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
which it was, because it's saving my life. But
Yeah.
like if the goal is to just keep people aware of what they're getting,
Mm-hmm.
like where I work, like if anyone like AMAs or just anyone in general is leaving, like we give them like fentanyl test strips.
Real
Narcan.
quick, the most people don't know what AMA means. It's against medical advice, right? So if people leave against medical advice, you give them what?
So like Narcan test strips. I'm sorry,
Not
fentanyl
Narcan,
test.
fentanyl. So they can test their heroin to see if there's any fentanyl in it?
Right, which I mean, I'm sure it's in every fucking thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we if we can keep somebody clean for another day, I mean, like I'm not anti-maintenance drugs. I'm not anti-harm reduction. A lot of people are like super like, what's the point? Clean or
Mm-hmm.
nothing.
Right.
But so I definitely became more open-minded at like how I can help people without
Yeah, dude, it's
pushing what I you know?
Okay. Right. I get that. And I think, there's so many people that need to be more open-minded with this. There's a stigma attached to drugs and people who are addicts, like heroin. Like there's not as much of a stigma attached to cocaine as there is to heroin, I feel like. And like that is,
Oh God.
I lost you there. That's all right. I can't see your video for some reason.
Sorry, hold on 1 second.
Yeah, no problem. There's a stigma that's attached to addiction in that lifestyle. Like people who think of heroin addicts, they think that, we're just dirty criminals and that, but that's not the case for everybody. Like for me, like, I lived in a decent neighborhood, growing up, when I was using drugs, like, lived in a rural area, I'm not, my parents are still together. Like there's so much stigma attached, but people don't realize like it can happen to anybody. It's happened to doctors, nurses, the list just goes on, man. The list goes on. And so having an open mind is important. And I think that's why, like, it's so cool what we're doing right now. We're talking openly about the disease of addiction and how we can navigate our lives into recovery and stay clean one day at a time without the use of drugs. And that's important that people who, if you come from a family of drug users and like those people don't know anything about recovery. Like hopefully they can find their way into the rooms or maybe stumble across this podcast or maybe find their way into a Zoom meeting during this time of isolation where they may not even be able to get out to get their drug of choice. Hopefully that they can have an internal change, to bring them to a point of freedom in their lives. So you were talking about opening your mind to I'm not exactly sure where you were going with it. Do you remember?
I was talking about harm reduction a little bit.
Yeah.
And how my brain has shifted from from 2014 when I first got clean, and I managed to stay like abstinent for almost a year, right? So I figured if I can do it, everybody can do it.
Sure.
So there's no excuse why anybody's on maintenance drugs or why people. I remember when I was living in a recovery house, and when people would relapse, I would like take it personal, and I would just, like we have to give it away to keep it, but I would just shut those people out completely. And early in recovery, you probably shouldn't be messing with anybody that's using.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
I shouldn't have been, but I wouldn't even check on them. I was just like, how could they do this to me? Like, self-centered, like, especially when it was somebody close with me. So yeah, man, it's just crazy how much growth I've experienced. Just like, it's not all about me.
Yeah.
And then after having a few relapses, like I get it now. Like I get it. Even after being miserable in a relapse and then doing it again a couple months later, like it's insanity, but I get it.
Right. It really is insanity, We think that it'll be different this time. If we just use one more time, it'll be different. Maybe you think that way because the drug you're using is not your drug of choice. Maybe you think your circumstances are different, but it's always going to bring you to that spiritual bottom. For example, when I mentioned my relapse after 9 months, clean, that was because I traveled to Oregon and I got my hands on some legal cannabis, and thinking that it wasn't my drug of choice, I was going to be fine. This wasn't but Dave, when, I found myself by the end of that week that I was out there throwing the rest of the cannabis into the ocean, and like, cause I was feeling that same spiritual bankruptcy that I felt with heroin. And then, I was I don't know, like I just threw it all away, man. I got home back to Pennsylvania. This was where I was living at the time. And within a week of being home, I think it was just a day or two, I was back to the heroin dealer after 9 months. So thinking that the specific drug is the problem, that is not the problem. It's us. It's an internal, something inside of us, which is the disease of addiction, and it's sometimes really hard to identify the disease of addiction. Other times it's easy to identify. And that's why it's said in the rooms of recovery, like, we have to keep our recovery first, because otherwise our addiction is going to be first, right? And we cannot forget where we came from. There's just little things that remind me of who I am. Without my recovery, I'm not going to have this podcast. I'm not going to have my family. I'm not going to have friends. I'm not going to have a job. And all this stuff that I have been working so hard for over the two plus years in recovery, like, I can throw it all away. Now, it might take a little while for it to, disappear, but eventually it's going to be all gone, and so I just have to remain in this process, as hard as it can be some days, as hard as it can be. Last question I have for you, Dave, is, aside from your family and your relationship with your higher power, what inspires or motivates you today?
I guess, so we can't go to meetings right now,
Sure.
but like, so sometimes I'll find myself in a meeting, like, judging people, right? Especially someone I don't know, or someone maybe that looks like they're fucked up or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I keep cussing, dude.
Oh, you're good.
Okay. So I'll be judging this person for coming into a meeting drunk or high or whatever it is, and then like, they'll end up sharing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like asking for help, and like maybe they'll cry, or maybe they'll just get real sincere, like they just want to be clean again, and they can't.
Yeah. Or they don't know how. They can. They just don't know how.
Right. And like, I feel like that every time I'm not expecting it, and I get, like, I don't even know I need help. Like, I need some kind of motivation boost, whatever. It comes from someone like that I'm judging, or that, like, I don't like this about them. They, maybe they do something that I don't approve of, right?
Sure.
But if I stay, like, open-minded, like we're supposed to, like, that's, and it happens all the time if I'm in the right headspace, like. But hearing something like that, man, that really, like, reminds me where I came from, and it just really reminds me that it's not all about what I'm thinking. Like, this person's struggling right here, and I'm judging them for being high, like, as if they can help it. Like,
yeah, man, that's deep, because the truth of the matter is, like, I don't know how to stay clean without the program of recovery. I don't know how to stay clean without my network of men. I don't know how to stay clean without my higher power, prayer, step work. I mean, the list goes on. Meetings, fellowship. Like, left to my own devices, man, I'm going to use again. So that's why I have to stay plugged in. And what I mentioned early on, like, and you did too, you mentioned, like, struggling with the Zoom meetings at first, but now they're really helping you. Like, I'm still struggling with them, to be honest with you. Friday night when I attended my home group over a Zoom meeting was like the first time, really, I guess, since the Zoom meeting I started attending them, where I actually felt the connection. And I think what the problem is that I wasn't treating the Zoom meetings like a meeting, because it was foreign to me. So, I have my Zoom meeting on my laptop or on my phone, and I'm listening, but I'm also cooking dinner, or I'm chasing my daughter around the house, or, because she just started walking. So, it could have been any kind of distracting me from getting that recovery. And like that is the disease of addiction right there. You know, that's the enemy coming in and trying to distract us from what is keeping us clean. So it's important to like really, you know, remember where we came from and do those things even during this time of isolation. Do those same things that kept us clean in the very beginning, right? We just have to do them a little bit differently now. We have tools available to us. So Dave, man, it's been a really good conversation, dude. I really appreciate you doing this with me, especially on Easter Sunday, man. If you had anything to say to anybody listening today, how would you conclude this podcast?
Sheesh. I don't know, man. Call somebody. If you have to go outside, go outside.
Yeah.
I live in a 1-bedroom apartment with my girlfriend. Like, there's just no way I could quarantine in here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, man, I don't know. Just don't forget to reach out.
Well, listen, Dave, if no one has told you that they love you today, I do, you know, and I want to extend that message to anybody listening today. It's important that we stay connected with one another. So reach out, you know. I think one of the things that I'm going to do on my next episode, you may see more episodes popping up now that I can do this remotely like this. I may do a few episodes during the week. I think what I might start doing is opening up the hotline again, where people can call into the podcast live and they can ask questions that are important to them to help them stay plugged in and maybe help give them some knowledge of recovery from other experienced recovering addicts. So thank you guys for tuning in. Happy Easter. And we love you guys. Yeah.
Subscribe now at A.live Panda on YouTube.